Oh, there it is.
Damien?
Yes.
I'm sorry, my clock is bunging. We'll do that action item right after Matt is finished, before the work session.
The addendum, sure.
Okay, I'm not hearing you.
Am I mute?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Not very well.
There's also a dial on the cord, Kathy, that it controls the volume.
Whereabouts?
Like, right?
That one? That one?
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ah,
I don't know if that helps any. Does that help any?
thank you. I'm already deaf enough. Are we ready to begin or?
All right. I think we're good, Kathy. We're live.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Bogota Board of Education Work Session Action Meeting, February 9th, 7 p.m. Would you please stand for the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Calling the meeting to order, if I may, a little late on that part. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the Bogota Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted in the Bogota Borough Hall, communicated by letter to the record, filed with the clerk of the Borough of Bogota, and posted on the Bogota Board of Education website. Irfin, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Alvarez.
Present.
Mrs. Coles.
Here.
Mrs. Lewis.
Here.
Mr. Miranda.
Here.
Miss Montgomery.
Here.
Mr. Ortega.
Here.
Miss Rackett.
Present.
Mr. Chavez.
Here.
Mrs. Van Buren.
Present.
We have the full board.
Thank you. Also present are Mr. Kennedy, Superintendent, Nathaniel Simon, Board Attorney, Elsie Luca, Student Congress Representative. I'm not sure if she's with us this evening. Mr. Evsel, Business Administrator, Board Secretary, and Elizabeth Ruiz, Assistant Board Secretary. All right, if I may have a motion to open for citizens' comments on agenda items only, please.
Motion Miranda.
Motion Chavez.
So I
Thank
guess
you.
second Miranda.
Okay, back and forth. Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Mr. Kennedy, is there anyone there? Question?
One person.
One question. Damien, you're muted.
Sherry, I gotta promote you to panelist. Oh, wait, let me see the other one. Can you hear
Hi,
me?
can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, sorry, okay. Sherry Solomon, 350 Larch Ave. Am I clear? I'm sorry, I'm on my iPhone. I want to make sure you guys can hear me. Am I clear?
Yes.
Yes.
All right,
You're
great.
good.
Thank you. I just wanted to recognize a group of really amazing, extraordinary students that are going by the name of Bogota's Helping Hands. They were just on the news, on the local channel 12 news, which I thought was really, really cool. Basically what they're doing, they're taking their idea of community service hours and turning it into a really special ordeal where they're recruiting other students, putting a really positive, kind spin on everything. They've asked me to be their supervisor, which I was completely humbled by, but they really are taking this whole community service thing to another level and, you know, going out of their way to shovel senior citizens, sidewalks and driveways, and not only for community service hours, but just out of the goodness of their heart, you know what I mean? So they've also donated $500, the entire pool of money they've collected while getting tipped while shoveling, and they put that towards the rec committee's purple ribbon campaign, which I thought was really, really cool. I just wanted to recognize them. It's Shahem Albeen and Ricardo Santana, who are the founders. There's a total of 13 members right now, including many other fine guys and girls. And I just wanted to applaud them for their leadership skills and for going out of their way to start something like this that is really trend-setting in this community. So bravo to our youth, and I say keep on going. We should all just encourage them as much as possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Very sweet.
Good job, Sherry.
I see no one else.
Good job, Sherry. Oh, wait,
Nope.
one more.
Antoinette.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
Antoinette.
Hi, good evening. I just had a quick question. The gifted and talented teacher for the grammar schools is going to be going on maternity leave. And I just wanted to know if someone's going to be filling in for those couple of months.
Yes, we posted the job already. So right now I have a couple of jobs posted. So we're looking to fill the position with the teacher. It is posted and we have not too many applicants right now. So our next step is to throw it into the newspaper because we've been using our frontline websites where we get most of our recruiting from. And then next step is Facebook and other superintendents text chains and stuff like that. But anyone that goes out on maternity, we try to replace with someone if we can.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Anyone else? No? Are we good then, Damien?
Yes.
All right, may I have a motion, please, to close citizens' comments?
Motion, Lisa?
So move. Oh,
Second,
Second.
Miranda.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
Kathy, just a question.
Yes, please.
Are we keeping the first public comment to agenda items, or are we switching it?
You're breaking up, Lisa. Could you repeat that, please?
I said, are we still doing the first public comments on agenda items only?
Yes,
Or are we open-
we didn't quite stick there, but there weren't a lot of issues. So,
All right, just wanted to know.
yes, thank you. All right, any other discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Kennedy?
All right, a couple of things. First, I'm walking in an addendum to urge Governor Murphy to include school personnel and staff members to get to the top of the list on the vaccination list right now. On the agenda, it should include in the last paragraph, District 37 is where Bogota resides. So it's just something that a lot of school boards are doing to push the idea that if we get our teacher vaccinated, I think we can open up fully a lot sooner if we could do that. We also, speaking on that, we have been in person in 2 of our 3 schools. Bixby School did have to close in person learning for 2 weeks because of a couple of positive cases. They are scheduled to reopen on February 18th. And right now what we're looking to do, the cases seem to be coming down a little bit from the numbers that we're getting on that Cali score weekly. And hopefully in the next month, we want to see if we can go to phase 2 of reopening, whether it's a full day with the cohorts or combining cohorts. But we're going to have to get some data from the community on whether or not they're going to send their kids back if we go full day. And again, that's also with the blessing from the health department. Also moving forward, we are going to be disabling the chat feature in the meetings. Public will still be able to ask questions like we just did, raising their hand, but there's also a Q&A button on the bottom that you could submit your questions to. What we're trying to do is to have our meetings run remotely as they did in public, and it wasn't, that chat was not meant for a running dialogue throughout the meeting, which occurred last meeting. So moving forward, you could still get your questions in, and you can still ask anything that you would like to at the appropriate times when questions can be asked. And then finally, I will be turning the meeting over to Mr. Matt Lee from New Jersey School Boards, who will be doing a presentation on ethics for school officials. Thank you.
Thank you, Damien. All right, is Matt present? Has he joined us yet?
Yes, I see him in the box. I saw him before, so he just has to get on now.
All right.
There he is.
Matt is our field lead. Matt Lee is our field service representative from New Jersey School Boards, and they come out to districts and do an abundance of different workshops and things, which we can talk about doing any future ones if we want to. I can send you all there's a list on the school board site, different things from board governance to communications and evaluations. So they're here to help us out with anything we'd like to do, or some retreats or brainstorming to kind of get us all focused on the same issues. So once Matt's with us, I will turn the floor over to him.
I am here.
Oh, hi, Matt. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Let me, before I share my screen, I just wanted to say hello to folks. As Kathy mentioned, I'm the field service representative for New Jersey School Boards Association, and I cover all of Bergen County. And as such, I am basically your first point of contact with all the services that New Jersey School Boards Association can provide to you as a board to help in your governance training and, basically, be a resource for you as you take on more and more of the governance role in your district. So I'm happy to be here. I have my contact information on our website. I'm very easy to get a hold of. So if you do have questions as you go along, please reach out. I'm happy to help. All right, I'm going to now share. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Sorry about that. That's what I wanted to do. Okay, if you can see my PowerPoint, could you give me a quick thumbs up? Yeah, excellent. Okay, so as Kathy mentioned, tonight we're here to talk about ethics. This is a presentation that we bring to many districts at this time of year, driven in large part by the fact that boards are required by statute to review the Code of Ethics each year. And while many boards will review the 10 tenets at their reorganization meeting, that's really sort of a very high level look at ethical conduct and standards for school officials. So this presentation is meant to give you a lot more depth around it and to bring you up to date on the latest advisory opinions and ethics decisions from the School Ethics Commission. So without any further ado, I will begin with a little background on the School Ethics Act. School Ethics Act was put into place in April of 1992 by the New Jersey legislature. And at its core was a notion that it's essential for members of local boards and local administrators to hold the respect and confidence of the people they served. And that members and administrators need to avoid conduct which is in violation of the public trust or which creates a justifiable impression that such trust is being violated. And we're going to see a concrete example of that as we move forward in our discussion of ethics. But suffice it to say that it's not only what you do, but it's how it can be perceived that can be a problem in how board members conduct themselves. And in order to support the Ethics Act, the legislature called on local administrators and board members to have the benefit of specific standards to guide their conduct, which clearly is an allusion to the code of conduct or code of ethics that we're going to talk about in a little while. And that also that there be some disciplinary mechanism to make sure that those standards are upheld. And that actually manifests itself in the form of the School Ethics Commission. And we'll talk a lot about that as we go forward as well. Just a side note, as they are supported by public monies chiefly, charter schools are subject to the code of conduct that is put in place by the School Ethics Commission. So why is it important for board members to be cognizant of ethical behavior and to comply with it? Well, if anyone is familiar with the New Jersey CUSAC governance indicators, which are evaluations of board behavior within a district, you'll know that in the context of the New Jersey State Monitoring System, CUSAC, all the points that you can gather there are important in terms of the district standing. So if you look at governance indicator 13 at the top of this slide, you'll see that in examining this part of your governance function in the district, you can see that they check to see that both board members and administrators have filed a timely and properly completed financial and personal relative disclosure statement, and also that the board has annually discussed the School Ethics Act, and that no Board of Education member or administrator has been found in violation of the Act. And as you can see here, that's worth 8 points on CUSAC. And as anybody around education knows, CUSAC points are important. So let's talk about what the School Ethics Act established. So I've alluded already to the School Ethics Commission, which is the enforcement mechanism for the School Ethics Act. We talked about the code as well, which didn't develop actually until 9 years after the act was passed. And as a little bit of background, was chiefly formulated out of a code of ethics that was established by the New Jersey School Boards Association in the mid-70s. It also laid out what conflicts of interest might look like for school board members. It established the need for your disclosure statements, those personal, relative, and financial disclosure statements that we talked about earlier. And it also put in place the need for the training requirements that board members have to adhere to. We typically refer to as mandatory training. And that looks a lot like this. So this mandatory training is to be provided by the New Jersey School Boards Association. And it basically requires board members to do training courses in the first 3 years. So your first term, 1 per year. The first year is about the skills and knowledge necessary to serve. And it covers CUSAC and its 5 areas. And it also covers the chief school administrator evaluation process. And this first year mandatory training is referred to as Governance 1. And rather creatively, years 2 and 3, you're required to take Governance 2 and Governance 3. And those are about, respectively, finance for Governance 2 and student achievement for Governance 3. Now, in any subsequent terms, board members are required to take governance 4, which is basically a legal update and talks about some of the other things that are, have changed over the last few years, including things like harassment, intimidation, and bullying, and other things of that nature. This is required within the first year after each re-election. Let's talk about the School Ethics Commission now. The School Ethics Commission is a 9-member body. It is appointed by the governor. Each person appointed serves for a 3-year term, and they're on staggered terms, just like the Board of Education is. There's a maximum of 5 from any one political party. And the composition is always 5 non-school officials, 2 school board members, and 2 school administrators. And we're going to see that that is not always staffed fully. And it's important that it be staffed fully. And we'll talk about that after we talk about the kinds of things that the SEC puts out. The first is an advisory opinion. And this is where a school official, whether it be a board member or administrator, can request an advisory opinion to determine if proposed conduct of a school official would be a violation of the act. And I talked about before, it's important that the Ethics Commission be fully staffed, because when advisory opinions are issued, it needs a 2/3 vote of the body of the SEC in order to be made public. And at times in the past, the SEC has only had 5 members. And as you can see by the yellow note there, we need 6 to make those things public in order to, and that would facilitate guidance for the entire state rather than just the person who requested the advisory opinion. So making sure that we're fully staffed and that the opinions can be available as guidance for everyone is critical. The other piece of the SEC's activity is around ethics complaints. Now, as opposed to advisory opinions, which can only be filed by a school official, ethics complaints can be filed by literally anyone. So a member of the public, a member of staff, a board member against a board member, or an administrator against a board member, or vice versa. All those scenarios are possible. And they are basically alleging that a violation of the School Ethics Act or the Code of Ethics took place. And in the case of violations of the Code of Ethics, they're very specific kinds of complaints where the actual specific violation in terms of the tenet of the Code of Ethics must be identified. And these are not anonymous complaints either. You must own up to them personally if you are filing a complaint against someone. So what happens if someone is found guilty of a violation of the act? Well, there's kind of a progressive set of penalties that can be imposed by the commissioner. They are typically recommended by the SEC based on the details of the case. And they start with the least severity on the left-hand side of this slide, and that is a reprimand, which is basically a rebuke by the commissioner in the form of a written rebuke. And it goes to the board member or administrator who's been found to have violated the act. And it pretty much ends there. The next step up in terms of severity is a censure. And a censure is, again, a rebuke by the commissioner, but is also accompanied by the adoption of a resolution by your own board that publicly acknowledges the fact that you have violated the code. So it's a little bit more public and a little bit more, embarrassing, if you will. The next 2 up are fairly simple to understand. They are a suspension, the length of which is recommended by the SEC and finally decided on by the commissioner. It is also, once again, accompanied by a formal resolution, and it usually runs in 30-day increments, so 30, 60, 90, etc. And finally, for the most serious offenses, a board member can be removed for the remainder of their term by the SEC. This is a bit of a scorecard here on the cases that have been decided by the SEC in 2020. Starting on the left, you can see that advisory opinions that were drafted, there were 21 of them, and only one advisory opinion that was made public. As to mandatory training violations, so folks that didn't adhere to the requirement to take governance 1, 2, 3, or 4, there were 22 cases of that in the state. And because of that, 8 members were removed from their board. Going down the column, you can see that there were 4 members who were suspended for violations of mandatory training requirements for 30 days each. And then 10 members were reprimanded. And again, this is very, situational in terms of the penalty assessed. So there's a close examination of the reasons why folks miss their mandatory training. And finally, on the right-hand side of the slide, you see school ethics violations. There were 28 ethics violations filed, 24 of which were dismissed, and 4 cases which were recommended to the commissioner. And we're going to take a look at those a little bit later in the presentation. I'm going to stop now and ask if there are any questions so far. Comments? Okay. Now I'm going to move into the one public advisory opinion that we referenced a little bit earlier. And in the case of this, which is identified by the citation you see at the top of the page. So A stands for an advisory opinion, 13 is basically a case number, and 20 is the year in which it was decided. So you can see some of the pertinent facts to this case sit in the brown box at the top of the slide. And in this case, the superintendent's sister-in-law, who was the brother's wife, who was a lunch aide in the district and was there before the superintendent, was selected by the principals as a finalist for secretarial position. The superintendent then asked the SEC if it was fair to prohibit a qualified and vetted employee to move into another role only because her brother-in-law is a superintendent. And as they issued their advisory opinion, the SEC said that if the superintendent had recommended his sister-in-law for this promotion, he would violate statute and tenets B and or C of the Code of Ethics. And they reasoned that the public could perceive this action was securing an unwarranted privilege, advantage, or employment for an other. And we have the word other in quotes because that is significant as it relates to the superintendent's relationship to an employee in the district. And that said, it would leave a justifiable impression that the public trust was being violated. Now you can see the pertinent fact here is that the superintendent was not the person who selected this particular woman for the post. It was the principals. But the SEC reasoned that the public could infer that the public trust was being violated and that he was giving the position to a relative for some kind of gain for someone he was related to. In this advisory opinion, they also emphasized that the superintendent needs to recuse himself from any discussion on his sister-in-law's employment as a lunch aide, which is something that he certainly would have known already, but they did re-emphasize the point within this advisory opinion. So that piece, that justifiable impression piece is clearly in play here, something we talked about a bit earlier. So I think I am able to see all board members in my panel here. And I'm going to ask if you all would sort of help out tonight and read a piece of the code as we go through the presentation. Just, I want to bring the board's attention to the piece at the bottom of each of these slides. So these are the standards by which the SEC looks at the facts in a case to determine whether or not there's been a violation of the code. So nothing we're going to go over tonight, but you can see that these are some of the questions or points of differentiation that you might want to look at if you're trying to determine whether conduct would be in violation of the code. So let's see, Kathy, if you wouldn't mind starting with Tenet A and read that for us.
Surely. I will uphold and enforce all laws, rules, and regulations of the State Board of Education and court orders pertaining to schools. Desired changes shall be brought about only through legal and ethical procedures. Do you want me to read the rest, Matt?
No,
Okay.
We're not going to read the standards tonight. I just want them there for reference.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you. Yeah, so this piece of the code really emphasizes the fact that the board is required as officials of the state to adhere to legal and ethical procedures in order to get anything done in the district. Going to, if I call on somebody who's not an actual board member, forgive me, but I'm gonna go based on what I see in front of me. And Ms. Ruckett, would you mind reading B for me, please?
Sure. I will
Thank
make
you.
decisions in the terms of the educational welfare of children, and I will seek to develop and maintain public schools that meet the individual needs of all children, regardless of their ability, race, creed, sex, or social standing.
Thank you. So many board members come to their service with certain focused needs in mind. So it may be they're very involved in their own children's education. Maybe they have been encouraged to run by a group that they belong to, a civic group or an athletic group. This part of the code is meant to emphasize the fact that once you do become seated as a board member, the scope of your interest has to expand to all the children of the district, regardless of any distinguishing characteristics. C, Lisa, would you mind doing this one?
Sure. I will confine my board action to policy making, planning, and appraisal, and I will help to frame policies and plans only after the board has consulted those who will be affected by them.
Thank you. So this piece of the code really is about defining what it is that a board's responsibilities are. And we often talk about these in our training at NJSBA, in that this piece of the code encompasses the four main responsibilities of a board member. And that is policy, planning, appraisal, and communication. And we're going to see a little bit later in the code that we start to talk about some of the things that aren't the board's responsibility. So here we very clearly define the role that they have to play in the district. Amanda, could I get you to jump in on the next one?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, Matt, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming again.
Sure, good to see you.
I will carry out my responsibility not to administer the school, but together with my fellow board members to see that they're well run.
Yep, so two important concepts here. The first being that board members do not administer the schools. The day-to-day operation of the schools is the purview of the superintendent. And then the second piece here is that board members don't get to act individually. Board members need to work with the rest of the board to oversee the district. Again, that's their appraisal or their oversight responsibility. So that's the two pieces in Tenet D of the code. I believe, Ms. Alvarez, you're a board member, is that right?
Correct.
Would you mind taking E for me, please?
Sure.
Thank
I
you.
will recognize that authority rests with the Board of Education and will make no personal promises nor take any private action that may compromise the board.
So this once again asserts that the authority lies within the Board of Education and not with board members individually, and reminds board members that they have no authority to make any promises on behalf of the board. nor should they take any action that may negatively affect the board. F, Mr. Ortega, would you mind helping out here, please?
Thank you, Matt. I will refuse to surrender my independent judgment to special interest or partisan political groups or to use the schools for personal gain or for the gain of friends.
So there's a temptation here when you see the word partisan political groups to only think of this in terms of Republicans or Democrats. And board members know that their position requires them to act in a nonpartisan way. But there are also other special interests that may come into play when it comes to board members being encouraged to run or supported to run. And again, those may span any number of different areas, whether it be the local music parents association or the soccer club or the scouts or whomever it is that may encourage you as an active member there to try your hand at being a board member. But once again, once you become a board member, you need to look at the district from a holistic perspective and not from whatever special interests you may have had as a member of another group. And it also, once again, reiterates that you're not to use your position on the board for any personal gain for either yourself or for friends. G, Mr. Miranda, would you mind?
I will hold confidential all matters pertaining to the schools which, if disclosed, would not needlessly injure individuals or the schools. In all other matters, I will provide accurate information and, in concert with my fellow board members, interpret to the staff the aspirations of the community for its schools.
So once again, a really critical piece of this part of the code is the piece that refers to those executive session matters that the board has to entertain periodically. Board members should know that the business that they conduct is meant by default to happen in public. And the law allows for 9 exemptions to that, and they are outlined in the Open Public Meetings Act. Unless you are discussing those topics, the business of the board is meant to all happen in public. Now, if there are matters that do fall under the 9 exceptions of the Open Public Meetings Act, board members are obligated to be to use discretion with that information and to only share it with sworn members of the board, their board attorney, or the administrators in question. There's no sharing of that information with family, friends, spouses, anybody. It needs to stay within the board because there is the potential, based on the nature of those matters, for the breach of confidentiality to cause harm to someone. And that's obviously a negative outcome that board members want to avoid. And then the second piece of this talks about how board members need to be correct, accurate in the information that they dispense to the public, and also to have a good sense of what it is the community wants for its schools and to communicate that to the administration. H, Ms. Lewis, could I ask you?
Sure. I will vote to appoint the best qualified personnel available after consideration of the recommendation of the Chief Administrative Officer.
Thank you. This piece obviously refers to the fact that boards of education are often called upon to approve the hire of personnel within the district, but that's not to be confused with the management of personnel in any way, shape, or form. That is strictly the purview of the superintendent. When board members do vote to appoint people, they are looking at it from basically 3 aspects. The first is, have we got the proper policies in place for personnel management, and were they followed? The second consideration is, has the chief administrative officer of the district executed the hiring function in a discriminating and thorough way? And the third is, does this appointment help us meet our educational goals, and is it supportable through our financial picture in essentially our budget? And those are the things that you are considering when you vote yes on a personnel appointment. Let's see, Mr. Chavez, would you mind?
Absolutely. I will support and protect schools personnel in proper performance of their duties.
So it's not at all unusual for board members to be approached in public, whether it be on the soccer field or in the supermarket, about some of the issues that may be happening within the school. It's important for board members to realize that the investigation of a staff member's conduct is not the purview of the board. And should people begin to speak negatively about staff members, it's the board's obligation to support those staff members. Certainly, if something is brought to your attention, it's okay to listen to whatever that complaint may be. But the proper action for a board member to take in that case is to refer them to the chain of command, and then to make sure that you make the superintendent aware of issues that may come to him or her sooner or later. And the last one, I think I have to circle back to you, Kathy, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, no problem. I will refer all complaints to the chief administrative officer, and will act on the complaints at public meetings only after failure of an administrative solution.
So this one clearly speaks to the chain of command, in that board members do a tremendous disservice, in addition to violating the ethical code, by inserting themselves into some kind of a complaint or disciplinary matter, if you will, prior to it coming to the board. The board basically acts as the court of last resort within a district. And if board members have become involved on one side of an issue or another before it reaches them and before it has exhausted the chain of command, then they have compromised their ability to render an impartial decision in that matter. So again, the proper conduct is to refer whomever has the complaint back to where the complaint originates, whether that be in a school building or with an athletic director or whomever, and allow it to proceed up the chain of command until it reaches the superintendent. And if it has not found a proper administrative solution at that point, then it may be brought to the board for action. And at that point, the board is called upon to act, but prior to that, not at all. So I appreciate your help in walking through the code. And now I just want to walk quickly through some of actually all of the 2020 commissioner decisions from the SEC. So you all recall that we talked about the penalties that can be assessed for violations of the code or the act. And you all should have a copy of the Code of Ethics. So I'm going to ask you, as we read some of the very high level details of these cases, to think about what the violation would have been in terms of which piece of the code, and also what do you think the penalty would have been assessed in each of these cases. So in the first case, we're going to look at a board member who's employed as a teacher in another district failed to disclose income received as president of that district's education association. Clearly that's a violation. So do we think that's a violation of the code or the act? And what do you think the penalty would have been on that board member?
Is that for anyone to answer?
Sure.
I believe, yes, it's a violation, and I think it ranges between 1,500 to 12,500 or something of that sort.
In terms of what, Mr. Miranda?
Violation, fees, charges. I
Oh,
had to
no,
see it.
no.
You were, that's what you asked. I'm sorry. I might have.
No, I'm just talking in terms of the 4 levels of penalty. So you have a reprimand,
Oh,
a
okay.
censure, a suspension, or a removal.
Probably be just a reprimand at first.
Just yeah, censure.
Okay, let's see what the outcome was. So in this case, there was a violation of the act, and that was the financial disclosure requirement that we discussed a little bit earlier. And the penalty here was a censure for this member. Next case, a teacher who's a parent sent an email to the full board about the superintendent's handling of an incident. A board member intending to email the board used reply all so that the parent teacher also received the email that included details of the executive session discussion. Now we know that this is an SEC decision, so there was a violation. What pieces of the code do you think were violated? And what do you think the penalty would have been in this case? And that's open to anybody. By the way, it's not an easy thing to guess which direction that the SEC is going in terms of penalty, especially when we're giving you a very small capsule look at the incident that most of them read very much like legal briefs.
I would
Any
think,
guesses?
yeah. Anybody else?
Mr. Ortega.
Yeah, I would think that would violate the code of confidentiality, and I think it'll be a reprimand.
Okay, Kathy, did you have one as well?
That's what I was going to say, the confidentiality and not using the chain of command, and definitely confidentiality. It was executive session.
Okay.
What about also the fact that it was a reply all and all board members were in the email? Like, is that a violation with the quorum?
Oh, I think I revealed it already, but yes. So there's a violation of tenet G with the confidentiality, and there was a potential there to violate the Open Public Meetings Act. The penalty was recommended by the SEC was a reprimand, but the commissioner has not ruled when we put this together. I'm not quite sure if he has yet, but she has yet, sorry.
Right.
Next case, a board member posted content on a blog that contained deliberate, repeated, and unnecessary attacks of the qualification, salary, and general employment of a tenured teacher in the district.
That would be I.
Anybody else? How severe is this?
I think pretty involved.
I would say very, probably at the highest level.
It is very severe.
I would say suspension.
I'd say removal.
Suspension or removal.
Let's take a look. So, correct, we have a 6-month suspension. So we have violations of C, E, and I. We can see that C, there were gross misrepresentations in the post. And one of the things that isn't detailed in the abstract that we have above is that the posts were meant to interfere with negotiations, which were ongoing at the time, and that it framed policies and plans before the board consulted those who will be affected by them. In E, you have a board member sneering and verbally attacking a staff member in public. And that diminishes the board's integrity and may intimidate the public to address the board. So that's where we get into private action and may compromise the board. And then we look at I, harm the staff member's ability to properly teach and perform obligations. And there's a couple other notes to this case. In this case, the board member argued his rights as a private citizen and that the required disclaimer was used and he was not speaking on behalf of the board. Some of the board members who've been around a while know that there's some sort of prescribed methods or processes in order to express yourself when you become a board member. You have certain obligations as a state official. And one of them is if you're going to publicly state an opinion, you have to say that you are acknowledge that you are a board member, but you are speaking on behalf of yourself personally and not on behalf of the board. Well, as it turns out, this particular board member did do that, but also referenced his own status as a board member a number of times so that the SEC did not believe that it was convincing that he was speaking as a private citizen. So you do have to be careful, even if you're following the process. If you're still, going full bore in a certain direction, it may sort of negate the sort of minimum that you had done to distinguish your own opinion from that of the board.
Matt, I have a question on that.
Sure.
Say you go to a town meeting and you speak on behalf of yourself, but you are a board member. Do you have to state that you're speaking on behalf as yourself and not the board member, or being a board member? How does that work?
Yeah, it's always good to acknowledge the fact that you are a board member and state categorically that you're not expressing opinions of the board. Never a bad idea to do that. As we discussed in some of these opinions, they're very sort of situational. So could I see, you not getting found guilty of a violation? It's possible, but it's better to err on the conservative side. Next one. So the commissioner revoked the district's send-receive relationship with an out-of-state district, identifying an in-state district to instead receive the district students. The decision impacted the board president's child. The president fully participated in actions that resulted in the passing of a board resolution to continue the relationship with the out-of-state district with tuition to be paid by the district. A blatant disregard for the commissioner's decision and a clear conflict of interest. What do we think the penalty would have been there?
They tossed him. They were like, get out.
I agree.
Yeah, that would be B, I would think.
And when the commissioner tells you what to do and you just go, that's a problem. As it turns out, the penalty was a censure, but it was only because the member was off the board, and you can't throw somebody off the board who's already off the board. The SEC would have recommended removal had that not been the case. But yeah, that's a clear problem. Okay. Last case. A board member attended an all expenses paid conference offered by a potential vendor that the member introduced to the district based on a pre-existing relationship. So a violation, of course, otherwise it wouldn't be here. How severe is this?
Censure.
Reprimand.
Everybody agrees? Censure?
Reprimand.
A suspension.
Suspension.
Yep, this is a pretty serious one. So you see violations of 3 different tenets. Penalty was a 6-month suspension. So action unrelated to duties. Board member really doesn't have any ability to influence a vendor decision, or shouldn't. Actions may have compromised the board's ability to contract with the vendor and the public's opinion of the board's integrity, and also use his position to gain benefit for himself, a free out-of-state trip.
I mean, I'm not sure. It depends where this trip was. 6 months suspension's not so bad. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I am just kidding. Please, I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing. It was.
I believe that the quality of this trip would have been judged by whether it was pre or post pandemic, because I believe it was
an open bar
Yeah.
I believe it was to Arizona, so
It's a
yeah,
nice
you
place.
take your chances pandemic-wise. Okay. All right, so quick question. There's a board resolution to approve the hiring of the architecture firm that you work for. Can you participate in the vote?
No.
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 Clearly not. That's a violation of conflict of interest. As it's laid out in statute, you need to recuse yourself if there's a benefit to you as a school official or your immediate family due to any of the things listed here, which generally encompass some kind of a financial gain or some kind of other benefit you may derive because of that relationship. In that case, you are called upon to take no part in the discussion and no part in the vote. My personal opinion would be just leave the room and don't be even present when that discussion happens. We have a note at the bottom of this in the gold box that just draws your attention to the fact that there are sometimes varying standards that get applied when it comes to looking at what relationships might look like and whether conflicts exist. In the case of the immediate family, this is the SEC's definition of immediate family, which means a spouse or dependent child residing in the same household. Now, the next slide we're going to look at is not who qualifies as immediate family, but who qualifies as a relative. And in this case, we're using the accountability regulation definition, which is outlined in New Jersey Code. And you can see that there's quite a range of people who qualify as a relative of yours. And it's even further exacerbated by whether they're related to you by, or your spouse or partner by blood, marriage, or adoption. So that's quite a big list of people that may present issues for you when it comes to certain activities on the board. So a couple more ethical questions. The district has an opening for a guidance counselor. It would be a perfect job for your nephew who lives 2 towns away. Can the district hire your nephew? Let's just go back here, right? So your nephew has been identified as a relative. So can the district hire your nephew?
No.
I see.
Yeah, I would say
a
no.
lot
Supposed to
of-
answer this is no.
Well, Mr. Miranda, you are mostly right. Okay.
Can I recuse
So-
myself?
Generally speaking, no is the answer. However, there can be exceptions in the cases of not being able to find someone to fill a very specific role within your district. The example I typically use is if you were looking to hire a Latin teacher, for example, in this day and age. That's not a very frequently seen course within a district now. But if your superintendent has established that course and gone out to hire an instructor for it and can demonstrate that there was an exhaustive search conducted and that no other candidate emerged that was qualified to take the role, the superintendent can appeal to the executive county superintendent to make that hire. But of course, this would be a rather rare circumstance. Next scenario, the board is meeting to discuss the superintendent's performance evaluation. Your spouse is an aide in the district. Can you participate in the discussion?
Yes,
No.
no,
You,
Mr.
I would
Miranda,
say-
Yes.
Lisa,
I
what'd you
would
say?
say yes. Yes, because it's the superintendent's performance evaluation. It doesn't have to do with anything with the spouse as an aide in the district.
Okay, so
But the superintendent is the boss of your spouse. So
I guess.
there's some conflict. I don't know. That's my opinion.
I would
that's what
say
I
this.
think
I would
also.
agree with Amanda.
Yeah, I
think
would
that's-
say there's a
agree too.
conflict there.
Yeah,
Amanda is correct.
okay, Amanda, good job.
So you can see here that a board member may not take part in employment matters concerning the superintendent or any supervisors in the chain of command between the relative and the superintendent. And you can see at the top here, if we could just go back to the sort of complete hiring personnel story we want to tell. The board can't hire the relative of board member, chief school administrator. We talked about that in the prior slide. There may be exceptions, and those are rare. If you have a relative who already works in the district, we discussed this piece, can't take part in the evaluation of the superintendent. Also, if there were to be a superintendent search within the district, you cannot take part in that either. All the way down to the details of selecting a search firm, creating an ad, creating a set of requirements for the job, no contract discussions, no post-hire evaluations. You're completely out of employment matters concerning the superintendent, and you are out of personnel matters for everybody in the chain of command between your relative and your superintendent. And then if there happened to be a relative who worked in the district, as we saw in the example from the advisory opinion, the superintendent can't exercise direct or indirect authority over that relative.
At this point, is it even worth being on the Board of Ed then?
I did it for about 10 years, so yeah. I thought.
Yeah, but that, yeah, I would say if your input is invalid or no input, I mean, it's useless, I guess.
I hope I didn't waste my 10 years then.
I don't know.
So then, like, what could you participate in? Like, what's another example?
Well, I was my board president for all of those years, so I participated in everything except for I made sure that I didn't participate in the evaluation, and I made sure that I didn't attend personnel committee meetings so that I had a clean break from anything that could have affected a relative of mine. Now, that's not to say that things that happen at personnel that I was allowed to be a part of, I didn't get briefed on later, but at least there could be no, perception that I was taking part in discussions that may have had an impact on my relative. But everything else I could take part in.
Very interesting.
Okay, next question. So the board is voting to approve the memorandum of agreement with the local education association. You are a teacher in another district. Can you participate in the vote?
Say that again, the board member voting memorandum, no.
Anybody else?
I agree. I say no.
No union.
But
Yeah, definitely not.
They're not a member of this local education association, so why wouldn't they be able to participate?
But
Aren't they all members of New Jersey?
it's the same in the whole
That's what I
state.
thought.
So, I mean, you can't participate in the discussions, but can you vote on it?
Well, we're gonna see. So this is an area in which the School Ethics Commission has relaxed quite a bit over the last 10 to 12 years. It used to be back when the accountability regulations were first put in place that an affiliation with literally any union that you could think of would have an impact on your ability to negotiate. They've scaled back quite a bit in the ensuing years. And this chart here is reflective of what was advised in 2017 in an advisory opinion. Now, the way you read this chart is column on the left is describing whether it's a board member or what the relationship might be to the board member. The second column is whether the person in question is the current member of a statewide public teachers union. The third column is whether they can participate in negotiations, and the fourth is whether they can vote to ratify the contract. Now, if somebody works in the district, right? spouse, dependent child, child who's not dependent, or relative. And remember that relative chart was a whole bunch of people. Anybody who works in the district, you're out on both fronts. No participation in negotiations, no voting. Now, if yourself, spouse, or dependent child works out of district, but is in a statewide public teachers union, no participate in negotiations, but absent some other conflict, you may now be briefed once all terms are settled, memorandum of agreement is done, salary guides are done, all compensation issues are settled, you may be briefed on the contract and vote. And then the last piece, so the final row, is a child who's not a dependent, so doesn't rely on you for support, or a relative who works out of district, but is in a statewide public teachers union. Once again, absent another conflict, you may participate in negotiations and you may vote. So this is a considerable relaxation of the past rules that around negotiations. Now, when we talk about absent another conflict, what does that mean? Well, typically it's this third bullet point here that comes into play. And that is that that immediate family member or relative has some kind of heightened union involvement. So they have some influence in their local that may take some guidance or marching orders, if you will, from the negotiations in your own district. So they may be a building rep, they may be on the negotiations team in their local, or there may be an officer in their local. And in that case, you may have some kind of a problem when it comes to negotiations or voting. Your board attorney should be the final word on that. So if your circumstances cause you to wonder whether you have a conflict, the best course of action is to have your attorney examine those circumstances and advise you on whether or not you can participate.
Matt, what happens after that advice?
You follow it?
I obviously, but does the, you know, I know in other government forms, other than Board of Education, that advice, whether inaccurate or accurate, basically makes the member unliable. So I'm just asking if that applies as the Board of Ed, or you're still liable for any kind of penalty.
You mean, should you actually participate?
Yes, or an ethical violation of any sort.
Yeah, you would likely have a problem with ethical violations. I don't have any real specific insight into that any further because, you know, I'm not an attorney. But again, you know, that's a good question for your own board attorney.
Understood. Thank you.
Advisory opinion A10-18 from 2018 also signals a little bit more lax stance on something that was previously, you know, more limiting when it came to negotiations. So that said, that endorsement of a candidate by a local or statewide union doesn't create a per se future conflict unless a financial contribution is given and is intended to influence a member. In years past, it was widely understood that if you had been endorsed by your local union to become a board member, you would refrain from negotiations for the first year of your term. And again, this is a little bit softer stance than we have seen in the past. When it comes to the doctrine of necessity, this really comes into play when there are not enough unconflicted board members in order to cast the required number of votes in a particular issue. And if that is the case on your board, then by invoking the doctrine of necessity, board members basically will declare what their conflicts are. They post that for a period of days, and then the board can gather together under the auspices of the doctrine and participate in discussion and voting, even though some of them may be conflicted. Volunteerism. School board members aren't necessarily banned from volunteering, but they have to think about a number of different factors that may dictate whether or not they have some issues with it. Generally speaking, you can volunteer for activities in outside organizations. So your PTAs, your band parents associations, your athletic booster clubs, things of that nature are generally okay, even up to holding an executive position with those organizations. But it is wise, should issues come before the board that would impact that organization, that the board member refrain from discussion or voting. Again, if there are questions about that, you should refer to your board attorney. There are activities that board members should stay away from or need to stay away from based on their degree of involvement with students or staff, and whether or not board members can give direction to students or staff, or handle monies, or it requires them to be there on a regular basis, such that they could be mistaken for a staff member because they're there so much. Those things are all red flags when it comes to your presence in the school. And it's always good practice to let the superintendent know if you plan to be in the schools for a volunteer activity in advance, to participate in that specific activity and that alone. Don't use that as an opportunity to tour the schools or look at the new computers or observe teachers. None of that stuff is your role. You do that one specific activity and then you excuse yourself from the school. This little chart here is a good sort of checklist, if you will, for deciding whether or not you may have a problem with the volunteer activity you have planned. So the answers in green there are what we would expect you to answer to those questions if you were going to participate in an activity that would present no problems for you. So if you can answer just like those green answers are, then you're probably okay. If any of your answers differ, you need to talk to your board attorney about that activity. This slide is kind of valuable because it quite clearly demonstrates that over time, the School Ethics Commission's standing on certain issues can change. So starting at the top, if you look at A04-12 from 2012, when it comes to interview committees, it's said that 1 or 2 board members could participate on interview committees. This would be with the administration coordinating that participation and inviting you into the activity. Their role there would be limited to observation and assessment. The ability to make a personnel recommendation is still strictly that of the superintendent. Now, just 3 years later, in 2015, in A31-15, they advised that board member involvement in interviews for positions other than that of the superintendent is not encouraged. We always ask board members, how many employees do you have? And the answer is 1. The board employs the superintendent. Everyone else works for the superintendent. The board does not belong in that function of the district. It does go on to say, though, that if the superintendent, for whatever reason, does invite 1 or 2 board members into the process, that they need to adhere to the guidelines from A04-12. There was a question in 2010 about whether exit interviews could be conducted by the board. That answer was a no. It was considered crossing over into the personnel function of the district. Couple closing points. When we talk about conflicts, boards are encouraged to examine your potential for conflicts regularly and develop a list of what board members may have conflicts and what they are. Those things do change over time when new teachers who might be related to you enter the workforce, or someone who was previously just a teacher becomes a union representative. So do take note of that over time. Any questions, consult your board attorney. Board attorney is your best resource for any ethics issues. and any conflicts that may present themselves. And then lastly, our school board notes, whether you get it in paper or electronically or both, is always up to date on the newly released advisory opinions. So a valuable resource when it comes to understanding those as they're issued. And the closing note here is again from an advisory opinion. It's school officials must always be cognizant of their responsibility to protect public trust, to honor their obligation to serve the interest of the public and the board, and to periodically reevaluate the existence of potential conflicts. The last page is a set of links that are that will bring you to the cases that we discussed in the presentation. And if you ever find yourself in quarantine again for whatever reason, maybe you want to spend some time reading some cases. Always a good time. All right, guys, I will open up to questions now. That's all my slides for tonight. Any questions or comments?
Just as a note, the site that Matt just put out with the last slide that he presented, the information that we sent you, that he sent to me, that we forwarded, that's on the last page of that on the PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah. Well, good to see everyone. Congratulations on your new members, and wish you all good luck, and certainly remind you that I'm a resource for you, and you know, happy to answer your questions as we go along, guide you through any of the services that NGASBA can offer you.
Matt, I would like to thank you. Yeah, it was very informative, and it brings light to many issues that seem to also happen on our board and previous boards. So it's very good to see that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Always here to help.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you very much.
Say good night, then.
Good night.
All right. Thank you.
Bye
Take
now.
care. Stay well.
Good night.
Night.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I hope everybody was comfortable with that. Had some good information. I will send you around the list of other programs that are presented, and we can probably brainstorm, maybe have another one in a couple months if you'd like to. So moving on now into the work session. Well, not voting, obviously, but first thing up is the minutes from January 5th, open and closed, January 12th, open and closed, and January 19th, open. We'll be voting on them at the next meeting, or you can ask questions again then if anybody has any questions now. If not, we'll move on to education. Agenda items 2, 23, 21. Excuse me. I'm going to back up for a second. I'm sorry, Damien, I'm sorry. If we could revert at this point to the addendum and address the action item before we move through the rest of the work session. I'm sorry, I meant to do that first. Does everybody have a copy of the resolution 209-2101?
Yes.
Everyone have that?
Yes.
All righty. Was that made available to the public?
Yes, it was posted on the website today.
Okay, great. So we don't need to read it. All righty. So this is an action item. This we will be taking action on. If I might have a motion, please, on 209-2101.
Motion, Lisa.
Motion,
Thank you. Adalia, I'm going to put you a second if that's okay. Lisa had the motion there. Any other discussion? As Damien said, just please insert District 37 at the end of that. And with no discussion, Arfin, could you call the roll on this, please?
Mrs. Alvarez,
Yes.
Mrs. Coles,
Yes.
Mrs. Lewis, Mrs. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda,
Yes.
Ms. Montgomery,
Yes.
Mr. Ortega,
Yes.
Ms. Rackett,
Yes.
Mr. Chavez,
Yes.
Mrs. Van Buren.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you so much. Hopefully any little bit will help. We need to get our teachers vaccinated so we can get our children back in school. Aim for normal again. All right, moving now back to the work session. My apologies again. Education items 223-2101 through 08. Are there any questions or discussion on that?
I had a question about 06. Does this refer to the same situation we spoke about at the last meeting that was an
Yes.
old, okay,
Yes, the homeless child, yes.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right, we'll move 1 through 8 to consent, going on to personnel, which is 9 through 11, 223-2109 through 11. Any questions on any of those three? Seeing none, we'll move that to consent. I'm sorry, BC?
Hold on. Yeah, I did have another question.
Sure.
Related to 11.
Yes.
What exactly is this? So the semi-annual payments, if you don't mind, could you explain this? I don't want to just agree to it and not know what it is I'm agreeing to.
I'll defer that to Mr. Kennedy to explain it more clearly than I.
It's part of our preschool grant, and we have to have 2 positions, and we run a parental committee that we have to have someone oversee it, and then also the PERD is the referral team specialist that deals with the students. So these are 2 positions that we have to have as per the grant.
Okay, thank you.
That help? Okay, great.
So the money comes from the grant. We're not paying from the budget, right?
Correct.
Right. All righty, so if we can move 9 to 11 to consent. Moving on to finance. Obviously, some of this paper will still come through before the next meeting. So 223-2112 through 223-2121. Are there any questions on that?
Yep, I have another one.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
18. I guess I'd like some explanation as to why we would pay for service we're not using.
So
I asked the
there was
same question.
a law was passed last year that the bus companies had to be paid no matter what, whether we were in person or out of person. And that's just reflecting that. So what ended up happening last year was this is for all our out of district students through the South Bergen jointure. And we then negotiated with the companies based off of what was used versus what was not used. But it ended up being a law. So they're just asking that we get that board approved so everyone understands that we have to do it.
Understood. Thank you. I also had a question about 19. Is there anywhere where there is a recording or record of or a spreadsheet of the savings actually realized by using the TIPS program?
In the code, it details out, it is 45% on the items.
Okay, I guess what I'm asking is, do we maintain records of what we are saving year over year? Is that, is that something that we quantify that what we're saving? I get that we are expected to save something, but are we quantifying what we're saving?
When we participate in the cooperative, whether it is New Jersey or nationwide, the program itself sending us those savings. So we have.
So you have an ongoing list. Okay.
Thank you. That was all I had.
Anybody else? I did have one question, which I apologize I didn't ask earlier. Damien, on number 20. And I'm not sure if we covered this earlier. How many doors does that include in the high school? And they're all in the high school, correct? Right. They're all in the high
Yes,
school.
that would be every door in the high school. I don't have
Every
the
door.
exact
It
number.
is every
Yeah,
door.
we
Okay.
did. I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, we did the first floor going into the gym.
Right.
Now this will be the rest of the school.
Okay, super. All righty. Any other questions? All right, then if we can move on to buildings and grounds, just the one resolution on Sustainable Jersey for Schools certification program. We addressed this last year, but with COVID, it sort of needs to be readdressed and move forward. Does anybody have any questions on that? This goes into developing what's called a green team that works with the board and with community members to look at ways to not only save financially, but on use proper resources, safer cleaning supplies and so forth, which I know Orphan's been addressing that already. Any questions about that one? I just do have a question, Orphan. What will we be doing about forming a green team?
We will need, I'm going to send a notice to the BEA president for participation from the teachers.
Okay.
We will need a board member liaison for that.
Okay. I'd like to do that if possible.
As soon as this passed, I mean, I can work on it. What needs to be done, I can prepare something.
Okay.
Send it to the whole group.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Okay, if we can move on to committee reports. Mr. Kennedy, is our student Congress rep with us this evening?
I don't see her. I don't know if she raises her hand, maybe. I emailed her yesterday. She said she was going to try and make it.
Okay. I don't see her, so we'll move on. But if she does pop up, we can. Do you see her, Lisa?
She was on earlier, but I don't see her anymore.
Okay. All righty, then if we can move on to the other committees. Adalia, if you'd like to report on, I know education and policy committees.
Yes, so we had brief meetings last week with the policy committee and the education committee, basically to introduce the new members to the committees and the responsibilities. We will be meeting once again in a few weeks. Our meetings were very short. We discussed the upcoming policy revisions and the educational school plans, especially for the upcoming school year.
Great, thank you. John, would you like to comment on buildings and grounds?
Yes, we had a brief meeting for building and grounds. We spoke about the temple update and the St. Joseph. We spoke about making sure things are up to standard in terms of inspection for the safety of the children, security, making sure everything's up to standard for our needs. We also spoke about the ESA program for the solar panels, energy saving costs, and that program will pay for itself. We spoke about small projects, the dumbwaiter, which would transfer food from the second floor to the first floor to transfer food to the Bixby and Steam, because it'll take a lot of strain away from the employees going down and up the stairs constantly. They're putting on the window films in the high school right now for the bulletproofing for the safety of the children, of course. We spoke about rekeying the schools as well, getting an update on security in that aspect. We mentioned the doors already. We're replacing the doors, making sure they're all functioning well. And also the garage. We're looking into renovating the garage for the teachers, getting some shelves in, making sure everything's a little more organized in that aspect.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Eileen, I know we just had a little meeting beforehand for finance. If you wanted to just briefly explain that we went over.
Yeah, I mean, so we just briefly explained, I guess, the items that they wanted to include in next year's budget. They're just starting to put the numbers together. So it's, you know, a list of kind of what they wanted to include in it, and some, you know, things we had to take into account with regards to like benefits and stuff like that.
Right. Thank you all. Did anybody else have anything else under committee reports? If not, anything under old business?
May I, Amanda?
Sure, please.
I just wanted to know what the next steps were in moving forward with Mr. Kennedy's contract. Like, do we all meet together, or is that a committee thing? If we could get some clarification on that.
I have no idea. I guess we need to make a plan. Damien, how was that handled last time? I was never on that part of the negotiations before.
I just negotiated with Nathania, who I guess was in between the board president and I don't even know who she was in between.
Okay, so I'll get in touch with Nathaniel. Is she on with us this evening?
Yes, she is.
She is? Okay, I didn't see her.
Kathy, maybe a committee can be set up for these kinds of negotiations.
Okay, well, let me check what would probably be in the negotiation committee. So let me check with Nathania, and I'll get back to negotiation committee, if that's okay with everyone. Anything else?
Van Buren? Oh, sorry.
No, yes. No, go ahead, Frank.
No, I wanted, just in case Amanda had anything else.
No, I'll just wait for the next follow-up to see.
Okay.
How are we doing with the RFP process? I know that was in motion. I just wanted to follow up and make sure. I've been out a little bit, so I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, you sound better. That's good.
Oh, yeah.
I will defer that to Irfan, because Irfan's been handling that.
The submission due date is this Friday. RFP sent to 8 companies so far, firms, and I received 2 of them already.
Okay, thank you. So we'll have to set up, once we do that, and there's a summary of those that reply, then we can review what's been submitted and set up a date for interviews. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Question.
Yes.
So as far as the interviews, would that be another committee too, or no? Or do we?
I think that would be better as a board as a whole, don't you think?
I don't know. I was just wondering.
It's the way it's been done in the past for that position, was a board as a whole.
Yeah, I think, Mrs. Van Buren, I think it's open and fair. Every member see every single applicant, and maybe somehow we find room for discussion publicly.
Okay, yeah, I do have a list of recommended questions that I can run past everybody, so we have an organized approach to meeting with the individuals. Anyone else? All right, anything under new business?
Yes, Amanda.
Yes.
I would like to congratulate Mr. Sterlings. He just got his 600th win in girls women's basketball yesterday. Many of those wins came from Bogota before he moved over to Secaucus. But I mean, what a tremendous accomplishment. And I just wanted to give Mr. Sterling kudos, and he deserves all the praise.
Yes. No, thank you. He's a good man. And congrats to the kids.
And a phenomenal math teacher on top of that.
Well, yes, that too. Anyone else? Thanks, Amanda. All righty. If not, if we can move on to hearing of citizens' remarks. Have a motion to open?
Motion. BC.
Second, Miranda.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. So if anyone from the public has any questions? I don't see any.
Yes, I see one.
Oh, there, I see one. Yes, Antoinette.
Yeah.
Right.
Hi again, everybody. Antoinette Ramirez, 98 Queen Anne Road. I'm not sure if it's just a typo, but I thought I'd ask on page 3 of the agenda, item number 06 says that we're paying for something for the 2018 extended school year program.
Yes, that was a court case that finally got settled, and the school was waiting to bill the person, the district that ended up being responsible for the student. So the commissioner just gave us the ruling that we are responsible. So that's why we have to pay now.
Okay, thank you.
And then Ms. Meberg typed a question. Any update on getting a new biology teacher for 9th grade? The kids are really struggling with the current self-taught, self-paced class. Any information will be helpful. Thank you. 100%. We have posted that biology job since the day that we needed to. We have not got any applicants yet. There is major teacher shortage right now in a lot of subjects, the sciences especially right now. So we'll keep it posted, but as of right now, this is the only thing we got. And as soon as we can hire someone, we will hire someone. But again, I'm having a tough time finding K-6 teachers right now, let alone specialty teachers like biology. So, we'll keep the posting open. That's all we can do.
Any other questions, citizens' comments? If not, I see no one coming forward. May I have a motion to close citizens' comments?
Motion, Miranda.
Second, Chavez.
Second, Ortega.
Got it. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All righty. Mr. Kennedy will be going into executive session.
Yes,
All right, we're prepared to do that.
I sent everyone a
Whereas-
calendar invite.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Whereas C 231 PL 1975, also known as the Sunshine Law, authorizes the public body to meet in executive or private session under certain limited circumstances. And whereas said law requires the board to adopt a resolution at a public meeting before it can meet in such an executive or private session, now therefore be resolved by the Bogota Board of Education that, one, it does hereby determine that it is necessary to meet in an executive session on February 9th, 2021 at 8:40 p.m. to discuss matters involving Nathania. Is Nathania on?
I would say litigation and attorney-client privilege.
Okay, thank you. To address litigation and attorney-private conflicts. That the matter discussed will be made public when confidentiality is no longer required, and action pursuant to said discussion shall take place only at a public meeting. Action may be taken upon return from executive session. May I have a motion, please?
Motion, Miranda.
Second, Chavez.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? No. All right, I don't imagine we'll be too long. Nathaniel, what do you think? About 10, 15 minutes?
Correct.
Just remember, everybody, to log out of Zoom and log into Google Meet.
Okay. All right, so everyone sign out. See you there.
Hello, can you hear me?
Can we hear each other? Good.
Now I can hear you
There
all.
we go. There we
I can hear you loud and clear. Actually, it's louder than inside. All righty. Once we're all back.
Motion to open public?
I don't know that we're all back, Frank.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I count 9.
You count 9. Okay, a motion to reconvene.
Motion from Miranda.
Second or
Second. All right. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion to adjourn?
Motion Miranda.
Second. Rocket.
Okay, all in favor? Any discussion?
Aye.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Valentine's Day. Stay well.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Hi, guys.
Stay well. Stay well.